Today's reading is from Genesis 50, section 18 through 20. Joseph's brothers came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Matthew 5, section 38 to 41. You have heard that it was said, "Eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth." But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if someone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat as well. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Divine Principle, chapter 5, section 2. Whenever humanity is to graduate to a higher level, a condition of indemnity must be made to resolve sins. The Course of Life and Restoration by Indemnification. Sun Myung Moon, February 26, 1978. The Unification Church uses indemnity to endure bad things, but actually it is a glorious word, a chunk of gold. It corresponds to the sacrifice because you have a purpose for paying indemnity, and you are willing to do it because it is most honorable, heroic thing. You must welcome the word indemnity. Your eyes must want to see it, your ears want to hear it. Your heart wants to accept it, and your whole body wants to do it willingly instead of avoiding it. How can you complain if you welcome indemnity? Indemnity is not detached from day-to-day life, being someone which might or might not happen. We know how salvation is connected to what we do in everyday life. We can even predict what to expect. Aju.
So, today is Veterans Day, and we would like to remember our veterans, people who really paid indemnity, who sacrificed, and who gave the ultimate price, paid the ultimate indemnity to let us enjoy freedom and to keep people around the world safe. So in the Unification Church, we have two concepts that separate us from the rest of the world. We have two concepts, true parents and indemnity. So I've seen a lot of sermons on TV, I'm sure you have. I've been to a lot of churches, but I've never heard the word true parents or indemnity anyplace but here. In the Unification Church, we use the word true parents a lot, right? True mothers coming. Good job. In Unification Church, we use the word indemnity a lot, right? Too late, William. Nobody believes you. Yeah. Looks like indemnity is not as popular as true parents. But what is indemnity? You know, sometimes we got to get the word right. Let's look it up. Got my dictionary here. Indemnity is to make compensation for hurt, loss, or damage. To make compensation for hurt, loss, or damage. Okay. Where do we find indemnity first? It first shows up on page 121, Divine Principle. Jesus had resolutely determined to accept the fate of the cross as a condition of indemnity to open the way for at least the spiritual salvation of humankind. Okay. Next time we find it is page 148. Whenever humanity is to graduate to a higher level, the person leading the providence must make a condition of indemnity to resolve the sins which he or his forefathers have committed. So before we can elevate all mankind, someone has to pay indemnity. So I'd like to say that indemnity is what has to happen before something good happens. Jesus spoke of indemnity. He said, if someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. That's the condition of indemnity because Jesus was trying to raise the Jewish people from the Mosaic law of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. He wanted to elevate them to the next level, that if someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the left also, to get higher, to get closer to God, more godlike. In the Old Testament, we also find indemnity. We know the story of Joseph, who his brothers wanted to kill him. But then they thought better of that and decided it was good enough to send him off into slavery in Egypt just to get rid of him. So he went to Egypt as a slave. He got elevated into the household of an official in the Pharaoh's court. And then he was falsely accused in that house and was sent down into prison, in the dungeons of prison in Egypt, which I'm sure was a very miserable place to be, especially back in those days. And then from the prison, he was elevated again to work with the Pharaoh. And working with Pharaoh, he was able to prepare Egypt for the great famine that was to come on the land, 7-year famine. And through his work, many, many thousands or millions of Egyptians were saved. And people, the whole region, people were coming to Egypt. So even his own family, his own brothers and his father, they were also saved by Joseph's work. And that's when he told his brothers, don't be afraid. You intended to harm me. But God meant it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So many people probably should have thanked Joseph if they knew what he went through, how he paid indemnity, how he felt, how his life was suffering to get to the point where he could save them. That kind of heroic, glorious indemnity. So just last week, I just want to tell you that I was reading in my little books, The Way of Tradition. I read, Father said, do you really know, not just in your mind, but all the way down to your bones, that your ancestor is Satan? So, that's not the kind of thing I like to think about. I don't even like to admit to that. And I don't like to tell people that my ancestor is Satan. I don't present myself that way. But if we look around us, if we look at the world we live in, if we look at the problems, we look at the wars, we look at the divisions, we look at the racial problems, we look at the strife between nations, we know that my ancestor is Satan. That's why we have all this stuff. And if I want to get out of that situation, if I don't want my ancestor to be Satan, if I want to elevate my position, if I want to get out of Satan's lineage, get into God's lineage, then I have to pay indemnity. Because indemnity is what happens before something good can happen. I have to change my position. And I read a speech, and Father talked about going to prison camp. A lot of people know about Father's life in prison camp. And he just said that when he went to prison camp, he welcomed that as a place where he could pay realistic indemnity. Realistic indemnity. So, what kind of life was prison camp for Reverend Moon? We know that that was not really prison camp. Because in prison, you kind of hold people to keep them. But that was a death camp. People were sent there to die. They didn't need to be there a long time. The average person lived there 6 months and then he died. They got one bowl of rice, one bowl of soup, one glass of water a day. That's what they ate. They had to work. Anybody here have a job? They had to work every day. They had to load bales of fertilizer, 88-pound bags, onto a train. And the train was shipping it out wherever. And they had to load 1,300 bags a day onto the train. If you didn't make your quotient, then they would punish you. You didn't get 1 cup of rice. You didn't get 1 bowl of soup. You didn't get 1 glass of water. So food was so precious to those people. They were starving and suffering constantly. They were cold constantly. They didn't give them nice apartments to live in. They were in filth. They were living with everybody around them was sick and diseased. And they were supposed to die. But Reverend Moon went there willingly, and he didn't die. He survived there 3.5 years. And even the communist officials, they recognized him and awarded him as a model prisoner and an excellent worker. That was his realistic indemnity. He called being physically abused, punished to the point of death, realistic indemnity. So there's no doubt that he felt pain. There's no doubt that he suffered in that place. There's no doubt that God feels pain, that God suffers. But he went to that prison camp willingly to comfort God. He didn't complain about being there. And he was able to elevate mankind to a higher level, because in that prison camp, he was certified as God's son. In that prison camp, he was certified as the Messiah, as the Savior of mankind. That's why when he talks about indemnity, he uses words like glorious, honorable, heroic. Indemnity is a chunk of gold. I'm sure that if I was in that prison camp, it would be hard to think of this honorable moment, this heroic moment. But that prison camp was realistic indemnity. And he was tested and certified as God's child. And he was tested and certified as glorious, honorable, heroic, and a chunk of gold. So, who wants to be glorious? Come on. You look like wonderful people. Who wants to be honorable? Who wants to be an honorable person? Who wants to be heroic? Who wants to be a chunk of gold? Who wants to be pure gold in God's eyes? Yeah. That's not easy, right? So this week's gift from True Parents is this. If we want to be certified as glorious, honorable, heroic, and a chunk of gold, we need to find what?
Indemnity.
No, not indemnity. What? Is it still up there? Realistic indemnity. People talk about indemnity, they're just bumbling about, I had a bad day. No, we need a realistic indemnity. So how do we pay indemnity? There are 2 rules of indemnity. The first rule is that the place of indemnity is the place nobody likes. Okay. I got a lot of places like that. The second rule is that the law of indemnity never applies when doing something for yourself, but only when it is done for the sake of others. Those are from fathers. I read that from father, okay? But that's just what indemnity is. How is indemnity paid? Father always talks about how do we pay indemnity? Number 1, you go through hardship and difficulty. Yes, but without complaining. That's it. That's it. Going through hardship and difficulty is not indemnity, in case you have a bad day. To be restored as an original man, we must reverse the process of the fall, right? Satan was a complainer. And God does not want you to be a complainer. God wants you to be a victor. He wants you to be glorious. He wants you to be honorable. He wants you to be heroic. He wants you to be a chunk of gold. And when we complain, we are actually driving God away. So the first rule is, when you face difficulties, don't complain. Try telling that to the political parties today. What's rule number 2? Go through hardship and difficulty willingly. Willingly. So, then let's get back to our subject. Indemnity is not just for prison camps, because Father said the indemnity is not, remember, detached from day-to-day life. Indemnity is not detached from day-to-day life. You don't got to go to prison camp to pay indemnity. Father said the law of indemnity applies to everyone. But God's idea is not to let every person suffer the same life I have. What God is thinking is to let one man suffer the most. The remaining individuals and nations won't have to endure that. But we still have to resolve our sins and the sins of our ancestors. We have to compensate God for his loss and his damages. What kind of indemnity do we have every day? Anybody here have a job? Anybody have a job? Anybody here work hard? Anybody here underpaid? Anybody underpaid? No? Anybody hate your job? Yukiko doesn't want to say nothing because I can tell, but you don't have to say anything, Yukiko. I'm with you here. That's right. Can we use indemnity at our jobs to be certified as pure gold? Let's look at Jacob in the Old Testament. Who knows the story of Jacob? Jacob, when he stole Esau's birthright, had to flee, had to run away from Esau's anger. And he went to the land of Haran to visit his uncle Laban. And Uncle Laban took care of Jacob. He hired him and promised him to give him his wives. But Uncle Laban, after he said all these nice things, he took advantage of Jacob. He cheated him of his wages. He cheated him of his wives. He just mistreated Jacob all the time. But Jacob, in that environment, he was steadfast. He was honorable. He was a chunk of gold. He did the right thing all the time as his shepherd keeper. And even though Uncle Laban cheated Jacob and did not keep his promises, God did keep his promises with Jacob. And God expanded Jacob's inheritance greatly while he was in Haran. And when Jacob left Haran, he was a wealthy man, having most of the flocks, having his wives, having children, having servants, because he endured his time there willingly, and God blessed him. So who has more blessings to give? Uncle Laban or God? So if we're being mistreated at work, think about Jacob. Or Joseph. What about Joseph? His life was like a yo-yo. He was up and down. It's bad enough to go down and stay down and then get raised up. That's not bad. But how about get up, then put down, and then get up again? Do you want to go back down? No. It hurts. But Joseph was treated that. Joseph went through that situation. Certainly he must have felt God was far from him. Oh, okay. So God was far from him. But he also was very steadfast, honorable, and glorious. And he was finally raised up to the point where he could save many. He saved the whole nation, and he saved his own families. The Reverend Moon in that prison camp, what was his life like? What was his life like? Okay. When Reverend Moon was in that prison camp at the point of death, he said, "Do not be discouraged. Even though sometimes you feel that there is no God, know that he is always present. With that feeling, you must remember that God is with you. When you feel, oh, there is no God, I'm hopeless, I'm discouraged, nobody talks to me, even God doesn't look at me, you must feel God is close to you, closely watching you. In that hour when you would think that you were apart from God, say, my heart is full and rich. I have God. I am full of grace." I tried that sometimes. It worked for me. When I was in the most critical emergency of being tortured in prison, I did not want to pray to God about this miserable situation. While the situation was unnatural, I knew that God was near. I knew his presence even without praying. In that circumstance of being close to death, it was not difficult to feel that God wasn't looking at me or looking after me. But I definitely know that God was there and was preparing to deliver me in an unexpected way. When I was in tears, unexpectedly God sent me comfort. I was in prison under the communist regime. The hard, inhuman way in which they treated me is beyond your imagination. Under that circumstance, even, I felt that God was always there and was comforting me. So this is a consistent strategy. This is a consistent strategy that people have used and that God has blessed from the beginning of time. So right now we have a new strategy ourselves for dealing with our rotten bosses. Right, Matsuda? I'm his boss. Or our disappointing co-workers. It's the same strategy that Reverend Moon used in prison camp, but the same strategy that Jacob used and Joseph used. Face your situation willingly, without complaint, and do your best to meet expectations. When you feel underpaid, unappreciated, that is realistic indemnity. You may have to go through that for 2 years or 4 years. Maybe nothing will happen. I've had that experience already. Maybe you feel that God is not looking at you. But Father said he knew that God was watching. And I can say that as a boss in my job, I know the people who work hard, who work without complaint. I know the people who deserve more. And I'm sure every boss does know the people that are like that. And when I get opportunity, I do things for the people that are without complaint. I do that. And in my own life, without my being aware, God has raised up my situation. That's why Jesus said, don't worry about what you will eat and what you will drink and what you will wear. God knows you need these things. Seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all those things will be given to you. What is God's kingdom? You should be glorious. You should be honorable. You should be heroic. You should be a chunk of gold without complaint. It happened to me. It happened for me. The indemnity is not detached from our everyday life. Every situation, I can elevate myself closer to God, out of Satan's lineage into God's lineage. Not just by being there, but by being there the right way, the way that true parents taught us. Where else does the law of indemnity apply? How about in our families? I know. It happens. It happens to everybody. Sometimes our relationships aren't what we want them to be. Sometimes our spouse is not as attractive. Not as attractive as she used to be. Father said, at that time, you can shout out, Father, I want to pay indemnity. So then in that time, be quiet, be patient, love your enemy, embrace and love your enemy. If you love somebody, unchanging love, no matter what situation, you are glorious, you are heroic, you are honorable, you are pure gold in God's eyes. What about the people of the world who don't want to pay indemnity? What do? They file for divorce. They take the easy way. It's easy. It's easy to get a divorce. She's not the right one. It's easy. That person has no honor, no glory, not a hero to me. It's not gold. Will he ever find somebody that's right? Never happen. And of course, the law of indemnity applies whenever we want to help God and to do God's work. So I'll give a little testimony. I go to the New Jersey Institute of Technology on Mondays after work, to help them with witnessing there. And I've been, largely unsuccessful, which means like nothing happened for 5 or 6 months. But I was successful in getting advice from other people. People telling me what to do, how we do things, how we don't do things. And, most of the time I just said, I don't want to hear it. So even my wife gave me advice. Takina will testify to this. If my wife gave me advice, which I didn't want to hear, sorry, Mommy, because you do it your way. You're you, I'm me. I do it my way. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. However, I had no result, so I could be wrong. So every Monday after work, I'm going to go there, and of course the first thing you think is, well, maybe I don't have to go today. Maybe this week I don't got to go. That's real. That's what you think. I mean, I'm old enough to be these people's grandfather. There ain't nobody listening to me. Why should I go? What's happening? Nothing's happening. But then I always think, because I'm stubborn, then I always think, what if today is the day? What if I go there today and I meet that person? What if I don't go there today? Then what happens? Then I go back next week and I don't meet that person. Of course. And it just goes on and on and on. Same thing. And sometimes when I'm there, I think about Father said, you feel discouraged. But Father said, if you feel discouraged, don't you know that I feel 100 times more discouraged than you feel? Don't you know that God feels 1,000 times more discouraged than you feel? If you've tasted rejection, Reverend Moon has tasted rejection 100 times more. God 1,000,000 times more than you have. So how can I complain? Does God want to reach these young people? Teach these students divine principle? Yes. Then I have to at least try, no matter how bad I am at it. So, remember Father said, indemnity, we know indemnity, and we know what will happen. So, of course, when you get to the lowest point, when you get to the lowest point, that is the point, of course, where you meet God. So this week, this one young lady that I've seen 3 times, I read Divine Principle with her in the cafeteria a little bit. I invited her twice, and 2 times she said, I'm coming at 12:30, and 2 times she didn't come. Then I saw her again on Monday, and I said, Daba, are you coming? She said, yes, I'll come today, 12:30, and she came. So we sat down together and we started reading Divine Principle. So indemnity is what happens before something good can happen. And I hope that this is the beginning of something great for that young lady, the beginning of her journey to pay indemnity, to resolve her sins so she can move to a higher level, leaving Satan's lineage and joining God's lineage. Jew. So in our church, we have 2 great ideas: true parents and indemnity. Nobody else has them. So will we welcome True Mother here tomorrow? Yeah. Do you welcome indemnity with the same heart? Good luck. God bless you all.